Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Core Energy Experience. I'm your host, Kurt Bruckmann. I hold my mastery in core energy dynamics, and I am a global coach. I write for Brains Magazine as a contributing writer, and I am a best-selling author. I'm also here with our associate director and our co-producer, Alex Fabio. Our special guest today is a conduit to universal wisdom. Her name is Karen Garvey. We are so fortunate to have her here today. And if you will, please subscribe and like. We would appreciate that very much. Hey, Karen. Good to see you today. How you doing?
Oh, good. Excellent. It's good to see you too.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're so excited about, having you here and lots to talk about for sure. So if you will, for us, start with a timeline wherever you want to start and tell us about yourself from past to present and perhaps what might happen in the future. And then we'll take it from there. That'd be great.
Just a little part of this, right?
Just a little.
Okay, so I definitely have an unusual start to this part of my path. I have an MBA. I worked in business. I had a good amount of success, and by the end of the 90s, I had my own business. And I also had started to recognize that I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be. So I put my sights on that. I learned everything else. I did great in school. Academia was pretty easy for me. So I was going to learn how to be happy. It was a skill like anything else. But I didn't know how to learn how to be happy. So I didn't read a book or see a speaker or anything that would seem like it would have some common sense behind it. But apparently when you have an intention, the universe takes over for you. And what really changed my trajectory was that on 9/11, 2001, about an hour from Manhattan, but for some reason, I was able to have my consciousness be at that experience. So I had just gotten back from a run and, I was punching the key code into my garage door to open up the garage. And I started to just get the images of what was going on. And I'm not really prone to tragic or creepy thinking or anything like that. So I just dismissed it and couldn't comprehend why I was seeing these images. Within a minute or so, someone was ringing my phone because we still had wall phones then and telling me to put the TV on. And I did put it on, and the broadcaster was making a supposition that a small plane had hit the tower. What also happened for me then personally is that I had this flood of information that I knew it wasn't a small plane. I knew that he wasn't accurate. I didn't feel any judgment. I didn't feel judgment about the event. I didn't feel judgment about the fact that I knew more. It was just as though I knew what others didn't know. So in the aftermath, anyone that lived within the vicinity of Manhattan had really, rolled their sleeves up and dove in because it pronouncedly affected us in our personal lives. And so I did that and put my own experience out of my head for a while. But then I started to experience things worldwide with 100% accuracy. I would also, the newspaper would hit the driveway at 5:30 in the morning. I would often hear it and I would know what the headline said. And someone in the family would say, all right, what's today's headline? And I would get it right. So the more important part of this is maybe that's interesting, but it didn't have any value to me because I couldn't explain it and it didn't make sense. But what happened also was I started to have knowledge of what was happening in other places, but it came with like a narrative, almost like the ticker on the bottom of a news program that was explaining why things happen, how people intersect, how worldwide events happen, what the purpose of them and what the benefits enfolded in them, how we're on a trajectory to discover and learn and grow. And as I started to apply that information to myself, let's go back to the end of the 90s when I decided I wanted to be happy but didn't know how, this information that was coming directly to me gave me the answers. And I learned how to unfold all the trauma of childhood. I learned how to reimagine the pain that I carried. I learned how to, fall in love with myself for the first time since I was a kid. And people around me, the few people that I told about the experiences, started to ask a lot of questions, and I would bring answers through for them as well. And they started to see their happiness factors increasing. So I continued that journey for a number of years with dedication. And finally, for about 2 years, I just plunged into it, and I gave myself like a PhD level course load in communicating with non-physical sources, validating with scientific evidence that what I was receiving was accurate. And at that point, I finally came forward and said, I really think I can help people.
Very nice. Interesting that, these traumatic experiences, spurred that sort of transition in your life, sounds like, and how you handled it. Tell us about the shift from what you were just explaining and how that felt going forward into sort of a new understanding of life.
Yeah. I think that we live in a left brain society where we value the intellect, we value academic achievement. We don't necessarily, of course, there's going to be spots of people that really value the arts and the creative mind. And growing up in a family that wasn't centered around love, but they were centered around performance and also cared very much about math and science. I would say that I didn't have access in a big way to any right brain activities, and I really lived in my left brain. And the intellect says, and it's reinforced by nearly everything in society, at least it was for me up until that point, the intellect says, we are this. We are our bodies. We are what we think. We are what we perceive to be within this tiny sphere of our own being. And when you have an event, when your consciousness is somewhere that is not where your body is, it explodes every myth that you've ever been taught, because you can't unknow that, and you can't recognize again ever that your consciousness and your body are one. So that set me on this massive curiosity focus of wanting to understand what consciousness is. But the other thing is, with the specificity of my childhood, I actually really didn't trust experts per se. So because of that, and I was embarrassed about what I was doing. My friend group and family, they were lawyers, they were doctors, they were accountants. They weren't the people you sat in the early 2000s and chilled with a glass of wine talking about the nature of consciousness.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
And I always joke, I didn't know a chakra from an elbow. And so I really closed myself in as I was learning and put myself into the hard path of learning without a mentor and learning without any guidance.
Wow.
And so it was a lot of trial by error. It was a lot of self-induced suffering, because when I felt connected and the information was flowing, I was happy. When I was disconnected and living back in the left brain, I was incredibly unhappy. And I think more unhappy than I had previously been, because now I had touched happiness, and I touched flow, and I touched possibility. So finally, over about a 2-year period, I was able to combine them and no longer have the disconnect. So instead of going in and out and in and out, I just learned to be in that flow. And that's when I started to recognize that anybody can do this. Anyone can do this. Unfortunately, we still are mostly incentivized by pain to really open up our minds to different perceptions and thought. However, if pain or tragedy or, just having a disagreeable set of circumstances, if that's what helps a person to push into an alternative way of viewing their own experience, then so be it. But in the long run, then I'm always going to be there for those people and help them understand, but not have them go through that PhD training that I basically went through on my own.
Almost as if it's a streetwise mentality, if you will, right? As we call that, as opposed to the book mentality.
Yes. Yes.
And look how moving it is. You know, you and I have talked before, and we resonate the same way here. You know, the
Yes.
experiences are really very valuable, and that's where our growth is. Whatever the experiences might be, right? We talked about it with core energy too. It's the same thing. You know, experiences, we like the judgment. You know, judgment comes in. Well, what was your experience like? Well, it was bad or it was good. Well, it's
Right.
interesting because when they say it was good, they, very up in there and they say, well, what's your takeaway? Well, I learned. And well, what about the bad experiences? Well, and their tone of voice changed. The catabolic energy comes in, drips in a little bit. But then, you stop and you say, well, what was the outcome there? And eventually you hear the same thing. Well, I learned, I grew. So our experiences or our past experiences are all about growth,
Yes.
and this is a
I agree.
tremendous amount about what you are and, what you do for not just what you've done, not for, just for yourself, but obviously for your clientele. You have one of your quotes I like, Karen, I have it here, is breathe in peace, breathe out fear. Fear is learned and peace is eternal. And
Yes.
I bring that up now. I don't mean to have jumped into it, but it's part of what I'm hearing from you as you have progressed into your latest transformation. And obviously, a lot of transition goes in with the transformation, and here you are now. Also, if you could tell the audience about how you discovered to be able to talk about love in such a profound way and for people to understand it and with full heart and to take it and execute it would be appreciative.
Okay. All right. So when I say I can communicate with non-physical sources, for some people that's kind of like a little bit of a hurdle to get over. But I think if
A
you
little of
if
the woo woo, if you will.
yeah, if you will. But again, I think I had 3,000 pieces of evidence before I even told anyone out of my circle. So you have to go a little bit on trust and faith here. So one of the ideas that was communicated to me helped me to make some sense out of what we're doing here. So let's like look at consciousness. So if my consciousness can be in more than one place at a time, then that means that it's something other than my body, of course. The analogy that I'm given is that this physical manifestation of the soul being here on planet Earth and being here within this particular universe. If we see the sun as giving life to planet Earth, and we often hear people say love is light and light is love and turn to the light and rise above, and when we hear all these analogies, it's because a lot of people are kind of attuning to the reality that this is a true focus. So if the sun is giving us pure life, without the sun there is no life in physical manifestation for humanity, then we want to look at the sun as collective consciousness. Okay. So in our physical journey, that is collective consciousness. And I think one of the reasons why we have things like, whether it's valid or not, people say they experience it, but like seasonal affective disorder, because when we're blocked from the sun, we're blocked from our source, our energy. In the physical, it's this big beam up there, this big ball of fire. But in non-physical life, it is collective consciousness, or whatever you want to perceive as that kind of elusive idea. Some people like the term God, some people like the term the universe, some people I tended to say in the beginning, all that is. And when you recognize that this light is bringing us all of our capability of experiencing the soul's journey in physical manifestation, you recognize that it's purposeful. So why were we born? And over time, I started to see that if you are consciousness and we are all connected, so that means we are the sun. Okay. And as the sun was growing and expanding, as all things in the universe do, the expansion of the universe, as it's expanding, then we are sparks that fly off of that. Almost imagine the sun in a centrifugal force throwing off sparks. So the spark is the sun, but the spark is also its own identity. And now we have an individual consciousness as that spark. And that spark is also not as hot as it used to be in the center of the sun. So our journey is to recall what we knew in being all connected by making our way back to the center of the sun, making our way back to original consciousness. Okay. Now, again, this is to describe the development of the soul in the physical, but it's the equivalent of us saying that love is metaphorically the same as light, and hate and fear are metaphorically the same as darkness. And the way to kind of see this a little bit more, I always tell people there's no such thing as hate. And there's no such thing as fear. And there really is no such thing as darkness.
Love it.
So in order, and they're like, yes, there is, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, let's go into a dark cave. Can you introduce light? Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
You can light a match. You can break the ceiling. You can build a fire. You can light a flashlight. Now, in a setting where there's pure light, can you introduce darkness? The answer is no, you can't. You can only block the light. And the same is true with love. We cannot introduce hate into anything. We can only block the love. And that's how I came to recognize that all these quagmires that we get involved in, and all this ways we talk to ourselves and see ourselves as limited and maybe in pain or suffering. If we dial up the love of something, then we take away the shrouds that are hiding the love that really does exist. It's a practice. It's not something that happens overnight, and it begins with the intention to do so.
Fabulous. Really fabulous. So empowering, all of that, Karen, in every way. And, the center of talk of consciousness and light, it really hits home. I'm sure all the viewers are following it with whole heart right now, because we all have these moments of darkness, and why we look at that and such a form of debilitation, that catabolic dump, and we remain there instead of trying to work our way out of it, looking for that light. My father, just to touch on this, when I was a young boy 3-4 years ago, would walk me through the woods at night, and he would always hold my hand. Then one night he just said, "I'm not going to hold your hand, Kurt, and I'm going to walk ahead of you." And he ended up walking fast enough where I was sort of alone. But he had talked to me. He had talked to me prior to this, explaining to me that no matter what darkness, wherever there is darkness, you can guarantee there is light, referring to the stars, the moon at night, things of this nature.
Wow.
That light is always going to be there for you. It may not be in the moment. That was his message. But it's going to come, and to trust the process of it. So I can't,
it's amazing that you had such a wise prophetic father,
Very fortunate. Yeah, very fortunate.
Wow.
And the same for you and your children. They have such a wise and prophetic mom, So if you will walk us down there some more, Karen, because you're really onto it now, and bringing that love of wholly and fully, how can we continue to do so once we've understand the consciousness of light versus dark, and the blocks versus staying open, with the love as such a wonderful word. And the other thing I want to touch on too is sort of a two-phased question at the moment. Love is so overused, and it bothers me because it's, I love this dish of food. I love the flowers. I love the clothing, and for me, it starts to drip away from what that true love is that you're describing, the empowerment of how love is. So, could you discuss that a little bit, please?
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly, which is one of the reasons I don't really use the word love very much in my practice, because people don't have a full understanding of what it is or how powerful it is. So I use different ways to help people, get to where they want to be. Um, and I don't know that we're going to have a collective agreement about what love is, because it is more about a vibration and an energy and a concept that's intangible. And it's also kind of, there's an irony, like you say, I love the flowers, I love the clothes, I love this. It's ironic because, like, even in a long-term relationship, oftentimes you see, I'm in love, I'm in love, and then things go south and all of a sudden they're breaking up or divorcing or whatever else, and oh, I hate him. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. So therefore, how can love mean something? How can you unlove something that's lovable, right? So for that reason, the waters are very muddied with that word. Again, one of the reasons I don't use the word God as well, because we have different perceptions and concepts of what that means based on our individual experiences. But instead, what I do is I'll just ask people to look at something and don't expect to go from 0 to 100. But what can you do to elevate this moment slightly, or elevate your perception of what's happening slightly? And if we can take that little step and then fall into a sense of peace with it, then we can take the next step and find something to feel positive about that situation. I'll give you like an example of something that I work with clients on. So oftentimes I'll talk to someone that has a health issue, and there's a process that we go through, and every health challenge that we have, every disharmony that we have, is a conversation our bodies are having with us to knock on the door and say, pay attention to this. You're going really fast into a brick wall. I'm going to just halt you for a moment to pause and let's look at something differently, right? We don't know that, so we often will address the illness or the injury with a lot of drama and concern and self-pity even, or anything like that. But if we just pause for a second and we say, what is my body telling me? How is my body interrupting my direction to ask me to pause and think of something differently? So the next step is that we look at the metaphor of the body part that's in disharmony. And it sounds maybe really difficult, but it's not, right? So your eye, I can't see. Oh, okay. So the metaphor is I can't see clearly, or I can't see. What am I not seeing?
Right.
So for the most part, even a systemic problem, there's a strong metaphor that the body is wanting to communicate with us. Now, here's the part where I say, like, let's elevate. And the next step is to say, what benefit to me is there with this disharmony?
Excellent.
And that's not an easy one. And I often see clients, pick the low hanging fruit and say, oh, it's so I don't have to, cook dinner this week, or I don't have to do this, or I can give responsibility to that person. That's most often true. But let's go a little deeper. Let's go deeper. Why are you having an undue share of the responsibility that you're wanting to forego? How are you valuing yourself because you are so hyper responsible? And so on. So we just keep going and going. And if you're going deep enough, you can find I'm holding on to something with the level of hyper responsibility I'm managing that makes me feel like I'm a worthy person and that I'm likable to the people that I surround myself with. Okay. That's just an example. But the idea is then here's where the magic happens is how can I bring that benefit into my life without the disharmony?
Beautiful.
And that's where you really got to think about things.
That's the
right?
work. That's the workload, right?
That's the work part.
Yeah.
And we can do it though, and the beauty of the universe is that we're not slammed with like the biggest diagnosis that you've ever heard. Things come in series. There's small little things. There's, an eye that's not, that's swollen. I got pink eye, or oh my gosh, I got 3 paper cuts across my right hand and I'm right-handed. And then it's oh man, I'm throwing up, my stomach. So it doesn't come as a big wallop because we're gently asked to pause and study the circumstances and see how we can turn it around to a bigger understanding of our experiences here. And if we do that with the little stuff, then the big stuff doesn't have to come.
Right. It's executing that conscious choice, back to your point earlier in the conversation, that's really important. And a lot of us cop out on that. But once we experience the understanding of what that means and how we can execute it to what you're laying out for the audience, and we appreciate that, invaluable information. Thank you. Is, sort of our turnaround, I feel. And it's very helpful because, the internal love that you're describing is the beginning of our external love, right? How we express that. But to this point, you've been discussing a lot about the internal and how we get there. And again, there is a lot of work. Let's go here for a bit. In relationships, partnerships, there's 2 of us. A hardball comes in of a disruption of some sort, and it needs its attention taken. And the pair, the couple, need to decide quite quickly what to be done. Now,
Right.
we all know if we're looking at a painting, the 2 of us, and an outside force comes in and says, Kurt, tell me about the painting. I'm going to say something. And then Karen, tell me about what you think about the painting. You're going to probably say something different, maybe a little similar, but there's going to be something a little different.
Right.
So
Yeah. Good point.
So when these hardball questions come in, even though we're fully aware of our inner consciousness and the understanding of, how it is for love and how you described it and laid it out for us, what do you suggest is best? Because this is where the arguments start, the dysfunctions start. And as we well know, the divorce rate is over 50-60%. That's a lot. So what do you suggest that partners do when they get hit with something that's very disruptive and they need to make a decision jointly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very big question, and I've given, multiple day seminars just about relationships alone. So to peel it back to the core, and I don't mean to say this in a flippant way that I don't value the institution of marriage or the sanctity of a relationship that's selected and chosen. But a lot of what we decide is important is based on false premises. Okay. So for example, the concept of marriage being something that is for life, it's a false premise. And it really is based on, if we want to trace the roots of it, it's really based on religion. It's based on no specifics, but it's based on, keeping property connected to the church rather than have it be divided by multiple heirs from multiple relationships. So if you recognize that the concept of the unity of marriage and the sacrament is based on the greed of religion early on, then you realize this is a false premise that I'm buying into without independent thought. Okay. And I think if 2 people begin a relationship, but the relationship is more, not to be dramatic about it, but it's like we really adore each other and we work. And this fits and it feels good. And tomorrow morning when I wake up, I'm renewing this contract. So tomorrow when we wake up, let's renew this contract. And realize that there are going to be situations with anybody that old friends, new friends, business partners, lovers, spouses. There's going to be situations where your growth and your intentions and your interests and your goals divide for whatever reason. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are, glued to each other. Maybe out of guilt or fear, if that's the dogma that you've been fed, but there's always a different way of looking at it if you don't buy into being motivated by guilt or fear. And that's the key, is to peel it back and really look at it and start to think, is this a temporary change in our perception of co-creating our partnership, or is this a crossroad where we're seeing we're going in different directions? And if we're going in different directions, does one of us prefer to go that alone, so that they're out there in the fullness of their own identity, figuring out who they are and what they like? Or are there other partners for us that might be more compatible with who we've become? Okay. Now, that being said, it may sound like I think that these relationships are disposable. I don't. It's not like we ask the question once and we make a decision and that's the end. If you value someone enough to enter an intimate relationship, then you want to value them enough to decide whether you both want to exit that intimate relationship. And that's the key. To not get caught up in how disposable of a society we live in, and to value the things that it is that we create, but also recognize that there's possibility for change.
Yes, very well put. And, change is a constant thing, as you well know. And why is that? Because it's time, and time is always changing. And
Yes.
and I've discussed this when we talk about core energy in any way you want to discuss it. Uh, we always lean into the fact that these are just moments in time that we're going through. As you pointed out, the pink eye, the stomach ache, things of that. Yeah, it's there, it hurts, and in the moment, it seems like it's never going to go away. This is where we have to trust our process and trust the understanding of time. And time is change, and we're always
Yes.
changing. So
Yes.
in our relationships, um, important to support the transition and the transformations that we're going through, each separately, right? And also together. So that lack of support, what would you suggest is a tool that we could use to show that support to one another, understand our different changes and transformations?
Well, again, it's same as when the body communicates with us and we feel, disconnected from harmony and good health. We want to hit the pause button there. And the same thing is true with a relationship, because oftentimes, like, I'll see a couple, they'll come to me and they they don't mean to be light about it, but they'll say, we're coming to you because we want to know if we should stay in this relationship or not. What do you see for our future? It's like, well, that's really not the way it works. But since you're here, let's talk about some other things anyway. And um, throughout the years, I've seen a lot of couples that have grown to really believe that they despise each other. Okay. And so one of them drags the other to me to see what they can do. And what we wind up doing is they learn so much about themselves, because we talk about, what do you value? What did you value in each other when you met? What do you value in your future? What do you value if you have children, in the relationships that you have with your children? So when we start talking about what we value and why we were attracted to each other and why we chose to make this commitment to one another, what I find is that maybe it'll take a month or two or three, but we they start to like each other again, and that surprises them. And I tell them without any hesitation, it doesn't mean that you're going to want to stay together, but isn't it better to separate if that's what you choose to do? Isn't it better to be friends rather than destroy each other and take this whole bit of your entirety of your life and toss it away like it's poison? And time and time again, I've seen this view works, because the place I come in that traditional helpers might not come in is I can intuit what each person is finding fault with each other and what the thread is in their childhoods that are preventing them from getting past it. So when we peel back, you two are not in this relationship alone. You brought the 300 people you knew before, and She brought the 300 people she knew before, and you're arguing with these 1,000 people or 600 people or however many. So we got to find ourselves in it and find out why you are a puppet to the marionette, right? And figure it out and cut those ties so that not only can you understand why you feel so uncomfortable in this relationship, but you can also heal from it and learn to grow and love yourself so that you're not bringing this baggage into another relationship. And when each of them see this and the way the dominoes of childhood affected them as the adults that they became, they learn compassion for each other, even if the other person had seemed hurtful. And that's where they start to become friends again. It's an important part of it is to stay in that compassion. Nobody was born evil. Evil is, again, the separation from the vibration of love. To become someone that is perceived as being evil, that person had to be really separated from a reliable source of unconditional love in their youth. And that's the way the ball bounces. So collectively, we're here to not only expand as individuals, but help others work through the negative consequences of their own abuse or neglect that they had had when they were children.
Yeah. You struck on a bunch of things here. One is the communication, right? This is where a lot of the breakdown happens between couples.
Absolutely.
And, they just stop communicating. And communication, out of all of our senses of uses of communication, listening is
Yes.
the predominant one, 70%, whatever it is. And therefore, that's when people get upside down or go sideways because they're too busy talking about their feelings and they're not listening to the other side. And
100%. That's
one of the
absolutely
exercises,
true.
right? Yeah, one of the exercises I use is the open and cup closed exercise. Do you know it?
Now I don't.
So when the couple are in really disparity and they're in disagreement, and they'll start to talk over one another. I say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We each have a cup. And you're going to have your cup open. So you're going to speak for 3 to 5 minutes, however that may be. We time it. And then you're going to close your cup. And the other person's going to be listening the whole time. Then we shift it, right? So they learn to start to listen.
Wow.
And it is so helpful that they come out of it and they start to realize, back to your point, that they need to understand what the issues are more clearly and understand one another more clearly.
Yes.
Very important there. Karen, the world's really divisive right now, and for many, many reasons.
I noticed.
Yeah, huh? So, so great to have someone like you out there bringing it is awareness about, love, self-love, continuous love, all of it. So if you could, let's go there a little bit. What would you profess to the world to help bring the awareness of love, how you described it, if you could?
Yeah. I see that when we are judging someone, especially someone that we don't really know, it really is a reflection of how we're feeling about ourselves, okay, and a sense of disempowerment that we have felt. All right. So what happens is negative judgment of another person, it gives us a moment to pause on feeling less than, and we're kind of like standing on someone's head, pushing them down, saying we're better than you.
Yeah.
And so that moment is like, wow, I feel good about myself. And the challenge with that is it's like gambling. It's addictive. It never ends. After you judge the first person to feel good about you or your choices, you need more people to do that. And it's a way to feel as though you're worthy. And what I say is that worthy people don't have to stand on someone and crush them to feel good about themselves. So we have to get back to finding out why we're worthy and why we're lovable. Okay. Unfortunately, I think probably the majority of people don't necessarily have the good fortune of being raised in an environment where parents know how to be supportive of their kids as individuals. Some of it is out and out abuse and neglect, but some of it is just a lot of misinformation that they have been given and they're passing it on to their children. And this right now, like what's going on is it's just a bunch of disempowered little kids pointing fingers at each other because they were disempowered in their own family environments, right? And there's also like an intimacy involved. Like some people can feel more empowered if they're disparaging or being mean to people that are very close to them. But some people have to have this energy poured out on strangers, conceptual groups. And that makes them feel like they're worthy and it makes them feel like they're strong. But there's no reality in it because they're not affecting others. They're not having real conversations or experiences with people that they're judging on a whole. So again, it comes back to what happened to you? What happened? No judgment, but let's figure it out. You know, did you have a mom? Did you have a dad growing up? How did they treat you? Did they believe in you? Did they make you feel like you were important? Did they make you feel like you were special? Did they treat you well? I mean, physically. And when you start to look at all of that, you realize that there are a lot of people that just didn't have good beginnings. I remember when I was a little newer in this journey, I remember seeing a photograph of like a lot of different politicians. I think it was like maybe the state senate or something like that. And all their pictures were there. There were actually no women in the picture. And I looked at that picture and I didn't see all of the men because my consciousness had been away from my body for so long. I wasn't necessarily looking at things the way a human would look at things. And that's an experience I'm very, very accustomed to. When I looked at this picture, all I got hit with was 12 little boys who don't love themselves and looking for power and looking for someone to have to do what they say. And it just kind of melted away any effectiveness that they could possibly have because it felt sad to me. It really did. It looked like a bunch of kids in a sandbox and just trying to get the Tonka truck away from each other.
Oh, my Lord. Yes, great metaphors.
It's just the truth. And that's why we can't bring ourselves into it. And I feel like I'm talking a lot here.
No, that's why you're here. Please, come on, keep going. This is fabulous. Yes.
The other thing that just popped into my head is the way I help people when they feel uncomfortable about the divisiveness outside of them is I say you can't put a fire out with fire. All right. So let's step away from a sense of hatred or vitriol or engagement in that level. Step away from that energy and look over here, go somewhere different and invite people, invite them to a place where there's something else happening that's productive and expansive. Right? Don't tell them to do it. Invite. Don't criticize, don't tell, but invite. And that's how you expand.
Excellent. Taking the action, it's all about that.
Yes.
To a point, again, from the beginning of the conversation to where we are now, we've come a long way with it. And, from the inner to the outer to the action part. So we thank you for that. And wow, great stuff. So tell me, love again, when we walk into a restaurant these days and we look at a family at a table, we might notice if a party of four, mother, father, and two children, that all four of them might be on a cell phone the whole time. What do you make of that? Is that inflicting a different understanding of love? Are we leaking love? What is all that, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's something that could cause panic, the disconnect between people and relationships. But we want to recognize that there's always ebbs and flows. And oftentimes we have to separate from something that is meaningful and separate from it in a bigger way to recognize the effect of its absence. Okay. A relatively recent happiness study was done, and people were interviewed before the study, and then they were interviewed after, and they ranked different choices of how important they are in your life. And one of the things that was pretty low in the ranking universally was getting together with friends and being with family and having conversations and all this. A lot of people were saying alone time and blah, 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 and whatever else they were writing down. Then they were put through this happiness series of exercises. I don't recall how long, but maybe a month, maybe two. I don't remember. And at the end of the series, they were interviewed again, the same questions, and everyone put relationships as number one then, or the majority of people changed their answer. And what they recognize, even with brain mapping, is that the parts of your brain that support your well-being, mind, body, and soul, they come alive and they ignite in relationships with friends, hanging out, enjoying each other's company, and so on. And if you allow electronics to divide those connections, then you're going to struggle. Your brain is going to struggle. Okay. Loneliness will set in, an overactive imagination of perhaps, fatalistic thoughts can occur, and it can affect people's mental health and well-being. So I do think in this great experiment of how electronics are affecting us, it's going to be an epic fail. The question is, how long will we continue to go down this path before people ignite for themselves and make a different choice? That's the question. Humanity gets to choose and renew or exit their choices every single day.
Mm-hmm. Choice, right?
Yes.
Back to that choice.
Yes.
We choose conscious choice over choice.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for
Yes.
that. So let's take one other step. AI is here. How do you feel that the AI is going to affect the understanding of true love, of spiritual love, as we've been discussing, the essence of what we understand that love is? What are your thoughts there?
Okay. All right. I'm going to go backwards a little bit to answer this.
You can go any way
And I'm
you
gonna
want.
say-
You're awesome. So the more the merrier here. Any way you want, please.
all right. I have a long time ago, I did kind of a spontaneous seminar about 100 years in history, and I think I did it around 2010. So it wound up being like a 3-hour seminar, and I just spoke everything I heard for 3 hours. And what I came to recognize during that was that we're in a period of accelerated enlightenment. And accelerated enlightenment, those who know basic physics, means that it's not continuing to grow at a constant speed, it's continuing to grow at an increasing rate. And the way that we can just see that demonstrated in reality for evidence is to look at that 100-year time frame, or even go from 1900 to 2025. Now, when we look at the advances in communications and technology and transportation, we went from being a divided world into a unified world, first beginning with radio and even, simple things like that seem simple now, telephones and so on. Now with instantaneous connection, the reason that rapidity is available to us is because as our accelerated enlightenment is increasing, our opportunity to recognize that we are all connected is also advancing. Okay. So in this moment, and and again, I peeled back each decade. One of my favorite decades in this transition is the 60s. I think I was weirdly not a 60s teenager or hippie or anything, because I feel like I might have paused there because so much of that makes more sense to me than a lot that we've done since.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
one of the reasons why there was this huge expansion of the concept of like peace and love, not even expansion, almost introduction of it, is because the big drug movement quieted oftentimes the ego, which rests in the left brain. And I'm not recommending drugs as a way to get there by any means, but in this great, adventure of humanity, it was a decade in which so many people were having experiences that they were connecting with things that are eternal, the nature of consciousness, the nature of the body being a vehicle for the soul to journey. This is why we had prolific artistry and music and advances in literature and science and everything. Now, again, let's not repeat that. But the decade occurred and just exploded because of accelerated enlightenment. And that became another benchmark for the continuation. So, in the scheme of things, even though we can't fully grasp how AI will affect our spiritual growth and wisdom, it is one more domino that's being pushed over in this rapidity. And we are being asked again to see what we value and take pause to see how we would like to live as individuals and as communities. And this will give us an opportunity to really peel back a ton of false premises. The false premise of 9 to 5, the false premise of, working for a living for 35 years and getting a pension and a social security check and then dying. Like, all of this is false. We have made it up collectively, but it's false.
It's all man-made, to your point, right?
It's all man-made.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all man-made.
And that's, where you and I, understand and connect so vividly, is that the judgment and all is just a bunch of noise. There's so much noise out there.
Yes.
I'm pointing to.
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
you've been spectacular, and thank you for fielding all my questions. And I know the audience has been enjoying it tremendously, and certainly we have. I would like to ask you one last question before we sign off.
Okay.
If you are now a white sheet, your life as you know it is not here, and you're a white sheet, what would be your approach to the world as it is today?
That's a really great question. My approach.
Well, I know you're going to have a great answer, so let's do it.
A blank white page, and what would be my approach? One thing that I remember I got years ago as a suggestion from guides was that before we declare war, have both sides of the table exchange children for 30 days. And that would be basically my approach. Instead of thinking, what it is like to be someone else, or understanding what the journey is for someone other than you, live it. Fall in love with somebody else's child who you have judged their parents. And if yours is tenderly being watched by someone and you're tenderly watching theirs, you have no choice but to engage with that kid. So my thought is that right now we're inviting tragedies in around the globe to elicit compassion. My idea would be to find ways to help people elicit compassion without the need for tragedy to get there.
Oh, that's so profound. That's great. Wow. Well, you nailed it, and that's great. Thank you so much, Karen, and so happy to hear all this. And I grew for sure. I know the audience
Oh,
has.
I
with
always
all
like
of it.
being with you. Thank you, Kurt.
Oh, you're excellent, Karen. Really, so much. So we would like to thank you. And before we sign off, if you would like to tell the audience where they might be able to reach out to connect with you, would be great.
Okay, sure. My website is karengarvey.com. Nice and easy to find. Email is karen@karengarvey.com. And I do, just for the benefit of people who may not have the opportunity with abundance to maybe do sessions or attend seminars or multi-day seminars, I do put up a post on Facebook on my Karen L. Garvey personal profile page every day. And over years, those 250 characters have helped a lot of people. And I invite people to, join me in looking at them, thinking about them, commenting on them, and hopefully growing from them.
Excellent, excellent. And we will. We're going to take your advice for sure. So there you have it, audience. A very special guest today, Karen Garvey. We're very thankful to have her on and appreciate her immensely. So for all of you out there, remember to keep striving and thriving and stay empowered. Thank you, everyone.